A passion project from one-man developer Resting Relic, this game caught my attention with its art design when I first saw it at the Xbox Summer Showcase back in 2020. I've finally gotten my hands on the title and had a full playthrough, and while not quite what I was hoping for, I think there is enough here to warrant your attention. Please allow me to explain why in my review of Song of Iron. The single developer of this title is named Joe Winter, and I followed his work on the game over the years as it went from a small side project into a full-on Xbox and PC release through his determination. Everything in the game takes place on a flat 2D plane, with fore and background movements being restricted to your enemy types. The tale begins with your unnamed character rushing back to his village, finding all his people either slain or taken by a rival clan. Over the course of 2 to 3 hours, you'll run to the right of the screen as you search for your seemingly magically powered armor in a bid to gain the favor of the gods as you seek revenge. Control-wise, things have a standard setup, with one neat exception. The X button is your standard and power attack, depending on if you press or hold it down. A is your jump and climb button, with the latter again requiring you to hold it. B is a powerful kick that sends your foes crashing to the ground, and you gain a stomp that opens up areas on the ground closer to the end of your run. Left trigger is sprint, left bumper is block, right trigger is to draw your bow, and right bumper is your interact button. The right analog stick is used to roll in either left or right directions, and you can crouch by holding it down, or slide if you're in the middle of a sprint. Overall, the system is okay feeling in one-on-one combat, which most of the game is thanks to being on a 2D plane. Things do begin to fall a bit apart when you are surrounded by enemies, though you can quickly roll through them and get them all on one side of you again and then just begin spamming attack. And I say spam because if you block someone, there's no real response to it. They can still attack you again before you're able to get one strike in and block yourself. The only move that really feels like it has weight to it is the kick, but even there, it is nearly impossible to attack someone before they can get right back up. The combat is, on the whole, just not fun, and deeply unsatisfying. The one part of it that I did have a lot of fun with is the Y button, which I hadn't mentioned yet, because that allows you to throw your equipped weapon directly into an enemy's head. It felt satisfying every time, and you get an upgrade near the end of the game that helps make it even better. The bow and arrow can feel similar when you get a headshot, but too often I found myself shooting well over the enemies or into their feet, thanks to being stuck on that 2D plane. There are a series of magical upgrades that are tied to finding pieces of gear that add a small amount of variety to things, but even then they felt weak, and the enemies never seemed to care if they were on fire or being hit with electricity. One of the biggest upgrades is a timed speed boost that allows you to jump over larger distances as you can run at a much higher overall speed. The mana bar for using these abilities refills when you're next to what seems essentially to be a wireless charging port with a bright blue LED. Your health and stamina, on the other hand, will refill on their own over time. This leads to long sections where you repeatedly have to wait around for 5 or 20 seconds for those meters to slowly tick up. It is frustrating just how often I had to stop running or climbing because my stamina had depleted after only a short amount of time, and it was a huge detriment to the platforming, which has its own issues. The majority of that platforming in the game is based around a few core concepts. First, there are the run, jump, and climb before your stamina runs out ones. Next, you've got move this box here so you can jump a bit higher and climb variant. And finally, you have the if you touch this, you instantly die platforming section, which really killed my enjoyment whenever they appeared. Song of Iron uses a checkpointing system, which are some fuzzy white lights on the ground, and some of the puzzles, though basic in nature, could take a few minutes at a time. Dying in these sections due to both the controls for running and jumping not always feeling great, or the timing being broken if you use that move fast spell was really frustrating. Having poor platforming on top of the overall mindless combat first-person narrative that started out feeling one note and then opened into something truly unexpected. There's no way to say what it is without spoiling it, and I always try to keep my reviews as spoiler-free as possible. So I'd say that story and where it goes is the only way that I could truly recommend this game at $20 to somebody, because no one on the planet is going to figure out where this story goes, and I went from feeling immense frustration during a poor final boss to a happy bewilderment as I neared the end of the campaign. Thankfully, the soundtrack of the game is wonderful, and as there is no voiced line work here, it is key in helping to set the mood, and it nails that. Writing is sparse, but when it is there, it's okay. It doesn't reach the highs of the music, but it gets its point across in a succinct manner, and I made sure to record some of the music for the video review, and I have found myself listening to it quite a bit. Along with the art style and story, it is the true highlight of the title. And getting back to those graphics, there's nothing in the game that I would call gorgeous, but the use of light, perspective, and the choices in the design of the world are very well done. The camera pulls in and out at times, but it never shifts perspective, and there were a few occasions in combat where foreground objects obfuscated my character. But thankfully this wasn't a common occurrence, unlike some of the bugs that I ran into. One of the negatives of a 2D plane is that you can find yourself stuck in various situations, namely anytime I had a box near a wall and an enemy who decided to stand on my head. Thankfully, the game's light physics system did allow me to eventually jump into the box enough to give the enemy room to fall, but I had at least 2 times where I had to restart the game as I got trapped and simply could not move. Add in things like enemies who just froze on the screen before disappearing, and one instance where a rock elevator simply wouldn't trigger, and it compounded on my frustrations with the combat and platforming in a very negative way. In conclusion, there were many times while playing this game that I felt it simply wasn't that fun, but time and time again I oohed and awed at the graphics and the music, and as it is a very short 2 or 3 hour experience, if that and the promise of a very interesting ending is enough to entice you, then there are worse ways to spend your time. Thank you so much for watching. Any liking, commenting, and subscribing you can do is a huge help for the channel, and if you do subscribe, please tick that little bell and you can know whenever we post. We'll see you here next time for XboxEra.